Good morning, traders, and a very happy Monday out there to everyone. First off, hope that y'all had a nice weekend there in store and are all geared up for this nice week in front of us. And just before we go diving into the charts here, good to note as far as our economic calendar goes for today, we are nice and light, if you would. No major 8:30 figures due out today. All we have is member Bostic set to speak at 12 o'clock Eastern there. But outside of that, nice and clear there as far as any major economic data goes. So, with that said, we come over here and jump into some of our charts here, see what we had unfolding in the overnight session. And for starters here, we have our S&Ps, which so far have kept themselves as an inside range bar during the overnight session, trading inside of our range from Friday. Friday we had our high of 47.60 and a quarter and our low at 47.02. So trading nicely inside of previous day's range. So certainly would be keeping an eye on the previous day's low and PD high respectively. Outside of that, we did have a couple back-to-back red bars down, or in other words, 4 days of high to low action with lower lows and lower highs, and we kind of kept that tone going up until Friday as well, putting in another lower high and yet another lower low. So far, coming into the session, we've just been left with an inside range bar. So some of these points that we'll want to latch onto, for one, 47.02, previous day's low, in case we were to breach that. And then on the other side of the coin, we have both the 5 SMA here coming in at 47.48 and change, as well as the previous day's high, 47.60. So 2 points of interest, up above, and then really as far as our points of interest down below, we'd really be dealing with our previous day's low from Friday's trading. But when we come over and look into some further detail on the intraday data, we also know that we were putting in some work inside of our previous area of low development. So we were able to put in some better work there on Friday's trading, and so far we can see, whether you're looking at a 120 minute or 240 minute data, we've been trying to hold up so far, that is, with a bit of a higher low on the 120 minute display. So we still have that same 47.02 kind of being more as a caution zone, but for now we'll keep an eye. This could be the first attempt of putting in any type of higher low that we've been seeing as far as the ES. So on the upside of the coin, I'm going to keep an eye on 47.41, just as a little bit more of an intermediate hurdle there for the S&P. So a bit of a higher low in the overnight session, filled in a lot of the blanks from our original markup phase that we had in the earlier portions of December. And now we're just coming in and, filling in some of the blanks there from our trading there on Friday's activity. So not half bad for the yes, a nice calm, doji bar, inside range bar from the overnight. So not too much of a major excursion there in the ES, but that's also nice because it gives us more of an open door in our US morning to put in some better work. And then moving on along, we have the DAX to take a look at here as well. The DAX had quite the tail that it left on Friday's trading, because we tested back, made new lows on the week essentially, but proceeded to end up closing as a doji bar, so along the lines of a feeling of a test reject. So in the case of the DAX, a little bit more on the positive side of the equation. We're inching ourselves a bit closer towards the previous day's high. Comes in at 16,788 to be aware of as far as the DAX goes, but we know that we did have some pretty heavy selling pressure from the trading on the 3rd of January, and we proceeded to get our follow through, so we looked below that tail, and now we're just coming back up doing some kind of damage control, from some of the heavier selling pressure that we had there from our beginning of the year. So taking that into account, we'll have our intraday data to view as well. Alright, so case of the DAX, this was our impulse down, so we did come in and make a much lower low. Then proceeded to give that, like we said, a bit of the test reject. So coming up with some decent, momentum to the upside. However, in viewing this 16,798 as kind of being a hurdle there for the DAX. We've had a couple data points in that vicinity, so several tests and trades that have been done there in the case of the DAX. So any type of further up, it's essentially what we'd be running into there as far as our DAX future goes, but not a bad feel for it there. It's been certainly holding its own with respect to some of the selling downdraft that it had there last week. So damage was done and doing some digesting, but still, doing all right job of holding their own. So that's where we stand there with the DAX, and then moving on along outside of our index future category. We have our euro currency next in the queue, and we're going to want to load this euro currency up as well, just on a little bit of a higher time frame here, more along the lines of like a 240-minute display. So, here with the euro currency, also, so far that is, an inside range bar from the overnight session here. We did have some pretty heavy selling activity on Friday, just did not end up closing at the lower end of the range. We shook it up on both sides of the equation and essentially landed back in the middle, so closed Friday as a doji bar. So with the euro currency 1.09080, the previous day's low, and 11.0310 as our previous day's high. So I know that's a bit of a wide range there, but a breach on either side of our range from Friday would likely generate some additional interest in that of the euro currency, just speaking solely off of the daily display. Coming into our intraday display of data, you can see, looking at our 240-minute oscillator, the fact that it's been trying to heal or hook back up without giving too much satisfaction from our price. So what we have here in the EC, sometimes they get a little play around the round figures as well, so we could keep in mind the 1.1 figure for that of the euro currency. But all else aside, they really have been rotating there inside of the previous day's range there, so a little bit more concerned with that 1.10310 and 1.09080 down below as far as being bigger points of interest in the case of that euro currency. But not a half bad look. Between that and the 240-minute data should serve fairly well for us in the early morning session. And then we have that of our gold also. We want to expand this out just a notch. So in the case of our GC here, bit of a different tone than some of our other groups. We also had a large range bar on Friday in the GC, like the euro currency. However, in the case of the gold, at least we were able to break or breach Friday's low. So doing some more work right into the low developed area, which we'll look at in a moment on the 240-minute chart. Came very close towards testing into those regions there on Friday's trading, right around that 2029 mark. All we did was trade down to 2030 though, so just briefly held above our big impulse bar that we had to the upside from December 13th. So here with the gold, another thing to consider is that we have been working with a few closes on one side of the 5 SMA. We've had our 3, 4, 5, and today, if we close below, would be day 6 on one side of the 5 SMA. So putting in some better work or better range expansion, if you would, in the gold. But when we take that daily chart, squish it back down and bring over the 240-minute or the 120-minute display, we have over here in this little blue rectangle box is just the nature of this original bar that we had to the upside in the gold. Not a whole lot of trading done between 2012 and 2029 in the gold. So in the overnight session, we were able to come down, traded below Friday's low, and started to dip our toe into some of this lower developed area. If we were to look over to the far left hand side, see we didn't spend much time around that zone in the gold, so just came down for the first try in the overnight session. So far, respecting it for the most part, just a partial filling in of the blanks, and we'll keep an eye because we'll have that same previous day's low to kind of latch onto as a reference point. Once again, that comes in at 2030.8 there in the case of the gold. So I already traded through it, so any type of counter-reactive lift, that would be kind of using that as a little bit of the over and under there, the previous day's low, as far as the GC goes. And then we have our crude next in the queue. Crude, one of the larger movers from the overnight session here. So here with the crude, let's blow this guy up here. Right. Curious progress it's been making on the daily chart. We have been having still good amount of trading around the 72.53 mark. We traded through that zone quite a bit last week. That was our original cycle low that we had prior to thus then breaching and then starting to come back up. So 72.53 has been a bit of a zone of interest. We've had a couple closes above it, below it, and now in the overnight session we're getting some pretty decent expansion to the downside. So for one, taking out Friday's low, however, Thursday's low comes in at 71.06. It should be. So as far as the crude goes, reaching a bit in the overnight session. This is, pretty good extension down, slicing through the 5 SMA as well. But as we come down here, I'll take this 240-minute chart, or we can even drop it down one notch to the 120-minute display. We can see we came down. We have 2 data points in this area, so would be a little sticky, or at least a point of interest for us, 71.06. If that zone does not quite hold in the crude, which, for now they're coming down and trying to respect it, but should that not hold, we would be working ourselves down closer towards that 70 handle, right, the 70 even mark. And, on the flip side, if we do proceed to hold, then we can have, some counter-reactive lift, just because we did have some pretty good damage that was done overnight. So as we'll see here, this is a pretty good testing phase. We haven't really seen major signs of buy divergence or loss of momentum as of yet, but this will be one that's going to look interesting on the market profile display, just because a lot of this action had unfolded during the overnight session. So in case we're left with any type of gap structure, we'll be pretty quick to latch onto that there as far as the crude goes. So one that we'll also be keeping a watch on there. And then last but not least here, we have the bonds, the 30 years. I'll scoot these over here, grab them back out on the daily chart as well. Bonds have been a slow deterioration. So we know bigger picture for one. We'll start off with those, right? Held at 4% and have been departing from it. Right, bigger picture daily charts, right? So 4.2 and change here on our opening, but definitely defended 4% even. However, on these daily charts here with the bonds, right, as we come down here, we had this nice 120.25, right, as our previous reaction high that we had before, then taking it out with nice impulse. So we've been slowly coming down, putting in some work. Also kind of reminds us of some of these other markets, right, with a couple back-to-back red bars. So here in the bonds, we've been unwinding some of the progress. However, not quite down to that 120.25 as of yet. So, they're still doing all right. They have an inside range bar forming for the Globex session. However, when we come out here, bigger picture time frames, we have a nice blue box here inside the rest of our low developed regions, right? 120.25 being the very bottom of that zone. And so far we've only done partial filling, right? We trade down to 121.09, so not too bad in the case of the bonds, but just kind of bearing in mind where we're standing here in the bigger picture, filling in some of the blanks without seeing too many signs. That about the best we would see here is like on the 120-minute display. We actually do have an interesting visual here of, well, our 1, 2, and 3 pushes down as far as the bonds go. So we'll keep an eye. It might be that they try and firm themselves up, perhaps by going sideways a notch and, find a little bit of footing inside this very large, low developed area on those 120-minute and 240-minute charts. So with that said, I'm going to dial it back here, get some charts back up and adjusted. No major morning data points here, so we'll just let everything settle in and see what we have lining up here for this nice day in front of us.